there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate Star Wars through music and sound, 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthe Tan, and today's episode is based on minutes 46 through 50 of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. This set of minutes takes place primarily on Ahch-To Island, and in this set of minutes, Rey and Kylo establish another Force chat connection. Rey shoots her blaster at Kylo, the Lanai caretakers are pretty annoyed, and Luke gives Rey her first Force lesson. We get a lot of sound details in these scenes, and I'm really excited to have composer, sound artist, and electronic music specialist, Justin Leo Kennedy, here with me to help parse through it all. Hey, Justin.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. This,
Yeah, the sound design is really great in this sequence.
yes, this is a really, there are a lot of specific things that happen in this sequence that are pretty specific to The Last Jedi, I think, and add to the whole, add to the uniqueness, whether you like it or not, adds to the uniqueness of this film. The cinematography does that too, and the sound really pushes in a way that almost in a similar way to the cinematography. But we'll get more into that. I'm really excited to have you because, um, I mean, there are a lot of things that I keep alluding to in these episodes and a lot of things that people talk about, but we've never really delved into what exactly is creating the effects that are being referenced. For example, whenever Rey and Kylo speak, that's like such a specific sound world that occurs like when they're having their Force Skype connections. And there are moments when all the music drops out, and what we get is this sort of epic, stripped down, but actually kind of sort of complex way that their vocals are processed. And then we also have all these sequences on the island and just all these fine details. You being an electronic, this is totally your wheelhouse, manipulating sounds and making sounds and figuring this out, sound design. So, yes.
Yeah, for me personally, Star Wars movies are always first and foremost a sound design experience. I know that for a lot of people that's not the case. For a lot of people, it's about the story and it's about the connection that they have with these characters. But really, what made me fall in love with Star Wars when I was a kid was those lightsaber sounds and the lightsaber battles and things like that. I actually saw Episode One when it first opened, and I was a kid at the time. And I remember the lightsaber duel between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan. Excuse me. Now, I was just about to say Liam Neeson, Qui-Gon Jinn. Uh, the battle between all of them like really captivated me. The sounds were just so fast paced, and the movement of the lightsaber sound is really captivating. And so that's really what made me fall in love with the entire franchise. And as we all know, The Last Jedi is a very different, it's kind of a departure in some ways in terms of sound design because Ben Burtt didn't come back for that particular movie.
Yeah. And while that creates a lot of, see, but it's sort of like same, different because we get new sound designers, but it's hard to undo. Like you can't undo the legacy of Ben Burtt. He created so many sounds that are just like canon to Star Wars. What, what are some differences? Like, what can you detect as an old sound and a new sound?
At least for me, the differences in how they're mixed a little bit. It feels like he wasn't present in the dubbing sessions for the sequel trilogy, right? So, when you shoot your movie and you do your sound design stuff, you do your voiceovers in the booth, right? That dubbing process, the re-recording engineer, the dubbing mixer, that's the last person in the pipeline of people who work on the sound of the movie. I'm sure you know that, but just in case you have any listeners who may not, um, and I can kind of tell that the mix is just different in these prequel trilogies, and that has
Sequels?
What did I say? Prequels. Sorry, I get mixed up a little easily. The mix just sounds different in more specific terms. Some of the higher register sounds are a bit more punchy and almost harsher, not
Mm.
necessarily in a bad way,
Yeah,
but
just different.
yeah,
Interesting.
it sounds like there's more compression also at times.
In the new stuff.
So yeah, um, just make it like the trend in Hollywood right now is to make
Compressed.
everything
Yeah.
as loud as humanly possible.
Right. Yeah, the loudness wars.
Yeah, and I don't think that Star Wars did a bad job or anything like that. I like the Last Jedi very much, but it's just a different approach to the mixing process, at least in my view, in comparison to the original trilogy and then the prequels, which followed that.
Interesting. I didn't pick up on that high register thing, but I'm actually curious to hear some examples. I do know that Matthew Wood was present, I think, on all of the films, or at least the prequels and the sequels. He is the supervising sound editor, I think. He also played General Grievous and the
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, and the what are they called? The oh my gosh, the troopers, the clone. No, not the clones. Wow, I'm watching Clone Wars now. Why can't battle droids? Oh my god! Wow, that was. Oh yeah, he played the battle droids and
That's
Grievous.
okay. I called Qui-Gon Jinn Liam Neeson, so.
Okay. Whew, okay. It's fair then. Interesting. Okay. Before we get to let's see if it presents itself in these scenes as we talk about them. Um, so what happens here? I think this set of minutes starts out with Kylo and Ren making their connection, and the thing that really stands out to me is their breathing. It's so loud and intimate there. I remember in the theater, like those scenes between Rey and Kylo were just extremely I don't even know what to say. Provoke like they were just made me feel a lot of things. Like creepy, on edge, like don't want to breathe, don't want to move, like oh my gosh, what is happening? Like I just remember being thrown into a completely different zone whenever they were talking and like breathing, you can hear their every like mouth sound and breath and it's just yeah. So
I
literally the
remember
set of minutes
feeling,
starts with like
yeah, I remember feeling like maybe I don't want to be watching this in a theater with people I don't know.
yeah, I mean, it had it just I don't even know how to describe it. It's just so many things. It's like um creepy. It's like, do I like this? Do I hate this? Whatever it was like it was on the verge of it could tip in any direction. Um like I was just telling someone yesterday, like it feels like a live wire and I just don't want to provoke it and touch it. I just
That whole movie is really bold. Like
mhm,
all the decision making is very bold.
mhm. Yeah. So then after the breathing, which I'm very fond of, um Rey shoots at Kylo and the sound of her blaster crosses the space barrier. And then I noticed the mouse droid after that we hear on the floor is very melodic. It's like doo 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 doo.
Yeah, that sounded to me like right out of the Ben Burtt library of sounds
Mhm.
that he created. Like they probably had like have like a folder, a whole hierarchy of folders with like Star Wars like you know library sounds, and that sounded like it was taken right out from one of the earlier films. I don't know if that's the case, but that's my best guess.
What do you think of while we're on the subject of droids, what do you think of BB-8 sound?
Oh my gosh, love. BB-8 is adorable.
What do
Yeah,
you how like what would you say about BB-8 sound? Like how would you quantitatively, not quanti how would you describe it? Like what it is?
I would say it's a similar sound design approach to R2D2, where you're taking these vocal sounds and kind of robotizing it, for lack of a more specific process or a more specific term. I remember watching this great interview with Ben Burtt, which is up on YouTube, legally up on YouTube. Um, and it's, him talking about coming up with the sounds for R2D2 and how he actually wanted to get, he actually used like a vocal performance in order to get like a human sort of baby like expressivity out of the sound. And that was a better approach than starting with purely electronic sounds, because it felt too cold. It didn't feel like a character you could emotionally connect to. And I can hear a similar process being used for BB-8, where it's like, let's start with a human performance and find a way to make it more like a droid, rather than let's start with a droid kind of sound and try to find a way to make it more human.
Didn't he have a synthesizer? I can't remember the name of it, like a very specific synth that he used.
I'm sure he
Ben
did,
Burtt.
and I don't know. I do know that on the
I mean,
film Wally,
in
which is,
addition to that.
yeah, he maybe I don't remember. I couldn't tell you. I do know the ARP 2600 was a big
I
synth
think
at the
that's what it
time.
is.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think he actually
And
used an ARP 2600.
I just love the ARP 2600, and I was like, well, that was famous at the time. I'll just throw a wild guess.
Oh, funny. No, you're exactly right. That's what it is. All right, brief interruption. We were talking about the ARP 2600. So, you like it. It's
I
bleepy, bloopy.
I I like it a lot. Yeah. So to explain what the ARP 2600 is, it's this cube basically with a bunch of electronics in it, and you can get these cables, and you can put one end of the cable in for where maybe the sound is starting, and then the other end of the cable into where the sound is going. So it's really exciting because you can see where the sound is traveling to. And you have all of these different modules and all of these different components which can affect the sound in different ways. And so if you're using an ARP 2600 to create the sound for R2D2, it's going to be a very robust tool to do so. I really love it. It's great, basically.
Well, Ben Burtt agrees. So, that that's all the seals of approval that I need. So after the mouse droid, and this is when we get like Kylo slides in the hallway, and this is when we get "You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me," and I'd like us to just like take a moment and let's try to break down the elements, like what sound wise is even happening when they're talking here. There's so much.
Yeah, the thing that stands out the most to me after the reversed sounds, which I'll let you break down a little bit more, there's a low end sound. They use this like low end sound to kind of, I think, to kind of allude to the idea of like a heartbeat that's like speeding up. Um,
Oh,
and it happens in a really low register, and it's basically it's what's called an oscillator. It's this thing that makes sound, and it's set at a very low frequency. And what they do is they increase the frequency, and it just makes it sound like the heartbeat is going from slower to faster, like and then that's kind of what's happening on the lower end of things. I tend to always notice the things that are maybe like um, very like I tend to notice things that are in the lower register a lot of times because my ears just go there for some reason, I guess.
wait, do you play an instrument?
I play synthesizer, I guess you could say, but I started on drum kit in punk rock bands, if that counts, and then moved to piano,
Fascinating.
and then moved to playing with a laptop and bleepy bloopy gizmos.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I hear the high end, which is like my classic thing. It's like I hear the high end, and I like when people can help fill out the low end thing for me because I just don't pay attention as much. Um, So that the oscillator, the the heartbeat, like how fast is the heartbeat going? Because when I think of an oscillator, usually I think of like an oscillator is what makes like a synthesizer. It's what synthesizes the sound, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
it's
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 like
it's
if
where the
there's
sound comes from.
yeah, like it move. Why is it called an oscillator? Because makes the wave like go up and down and makes sound.
Yeah, it's oscillating. It's moving back and forth, right? So an oscillator, just imagine like a wavy line in your head of something that goes up and then back down and up and back down. And so it's oscillating between usually these two poles. There's oh, listen to me go. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
There's there's unipolar polarity and then there's bipolar polarity. But it's called an oscillator basically because it's going back and forth between the poles, more or less. It's oscillating back and forth.
Right. Like like if you imagine a sine wave, do you mean like the very very top part of it and the very very bottom of it?
Yep, it goes like way up and way down,
Yeah.
and you can shrink that down if you want to. But and so the faster that the thing is going, the
Hmm.
higher the frequency is going to be, and the slower
Which
that the
means the
thing
more
is
times
going.
it travels up and down, up and down, up and down. I mean, I
Yeah.
think this is a concept that a lot of people probably have learned in like math and physics. I mean, if you took those things, which I think a lot of people maybe got that in math
Yes.
class. I remember learning about like sine waves and or I don't know if we called them waves in like calculus, but definitely like the image of a sine wave, like basically a wave, like whether it's happening through sound or whether it's like literally a wave in the ocean. It's the same principles, right?
Yeah. Synthesis is all around us.
Yeah.
I tend to see the world as just this like really beautiful algorithm that's in a constant state of flux,
Hmm.
and everything is just like this unfolding calculation. And waveforms are everywhere all the time, and we can use them for different purposes. And so that takes us into this idea of sound synthesis. And you do encounter waveforms and all different kinds of math. I like to pretend that I'm like really great at math, but I'm not actually. Um, I just like to see myself that way in my head. But basically, what I'm getting at here is that a waveform speeding up is something that we encounter in lots of facets of life, not just in really exciting Star Wars scenes.
Totally. I'm just trying to draw. My brain likes to draw like 50 parallels and like a, a lot of different connections, but I think I might over-explain sometimes. So I'm trying not to do that, but I also don't want to under-explain. So, yeah, I'm fascinated by sound. I'm fascinated by waves, by sound waves, and um, how pairing multiple oscillators together, or against each other, or whatever, can manipulate a sound.
Well, I
Um,
have I have an example if you're interested, or I can
yeah,
hold off or not do it altogether. But I have an example
I
of
am.
said. Oh, wonderful! I'm excited. Um, okay, so I am going to play us a little sound ditty here.
What
It
are
may
you
not
going
be
to play us?
yeah, so it may not be too. It's definitely not going to be music. It'll be. This is going to be an oscillator, and what we're going to listen to in particular is called a Sawtooth Oscillator, and it's like a right triangle that repeats over and over and over again.
Do you have the? Can you play a sine one first?
Sure.
Because I think it would be helpful to hear like what a pure, what the purest wave is.
That's a great idea. Okay, I'll play a sine wave. I'll try to play it kind of low so that it's not. Let's see. I don't want to hurt people's ears. It's so low that we can't hear it. One sec.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear it.
So, so
Hold on.
there's our sine wave.
Wait, it's yep. Yep.
And
So if we were to describe, so that sounds to me very like smooth. It's doesn't feel like very textured.
yeah, it actually
Can you play
has
it for a
no.
little longer? A
Sure, I
tiny
can.
bit softer. Yep. So listeners, you can let that sink in. All right.
It
No.
actually is a nice sound because it has no overtones. Um,
Yes.
so it's very pure, quote
Yes.
unquote.
I love sine waves. I'm pretty obsessed with them.
Yeah, they're a lot more. They don't get as much love or credit as they should these days. They're wonderful. Um, so if we were to switch to a sawtooth wave,
Which
let
literally
me.
looks like the instead of not nice curves, like a sine wave goes like up and down and like a curves,
Yeah,
like valleys, peaks and valleys, up and down. Sawtooth is like imagine straight lines almost in how would you describe it? It's jagged. It looks like mountains, right?
yeah, it looks like mountains, like a right triangle in math, and
Yeah.
very jagged. And so it actually sounds the way it looks.
Oh, play it.
Um,
Okay.
okay, so let's play it. I'll turn it down. I don't want it to be too loud. Jeez, that's terrible. Hold on. That was way too loud. Sorry, everybody. Let's do that again.
Yeah. Can you like let it play a little longer?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's buzzy.
Sorry. I always laugh when I play an oscillator for a long time because I think of my students when I first started teaching. It's very difficult when you teach synthesis to students. I teach at a university. Um, and it's very difficult when you first start teaching synthesis because you sort of get used to just hearing it and talking over it. But students who are brand new to the class, they're not used to that. So, I'll just be like, and so this is how a sawtooth works. And so I always laugh when I play it for an extended time because I'm thinking about those experiences. But it's a very buzzy kind of a sound. It's used in quite a bit of music, actually.
Yeah.
So, but if you were to, lower that quite a bit, so I've put on what's called a filter. So I didn't lower the pitch, but what I did is I'm getting rid of the high register sounds, like the really high end stuff.
So
So
the
if I
filter is suppressing some of the frequencies,
yeah, so anything that's a higher
pitch.
frequency,
Yeah.
where yeah, a higher pitch or a higher frequency that is coming from the sawtooth wave, we're saying I want to kind of get rid of that altogether, and that's what's called a low pass filter. In other words, we're saying, hey, only the low sounds shall pass through to our ears.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can move the filter down. And so we can still hear the sound, but we don't hear the upper register as much.
So when you say move the filter down, you mean you are suppressing more and more.
Yeah, we're moving the filter cutoff and we're suppressing the higher frequencies more and more as we move that cutoff down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'll turn it up just a little. Is that too loud or okay on your end for listeners?
I turn it down a little bit. Yeah, that's good.
Wonderful. Um, so if we were to lower then the frequency of this sound, it will slow down so much that it'll sound almost like a car, like a motor.
Okay. 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 So let me just clarify and see if I understand this correctly. You are still, it's not just the fact that it's a sawtooth and it's a low frequency. It's that plus the filter that you have that is suppressing the higher registers. And that way, when the wave is traveling, it's going up and down, or it's going up. It's doing its jagged thing, but still, a wave is still like it's jagged and it's one iteration. But when you repeat it, it's like you keep repeating and repeating it. So it's the same jagged pattern, but you're cutting off so much of the top that you only hear sound like when it gets to the bottom, when it gets to the part that's not cut off.
So the filter is just cutting out the high poppy sounds. So if I were to turn the filter off, it's real clicky. And
Oh, okay.
and if I put the filter on,
I see. I see. I see.
it's still clicky, but not as clicky.
I get
And
what you're saying.
that kind of helps it to sound a bit more like a heartbeat because heartbeats aren't really clicky.
Mhm. Mhm.
That almost sounds more like an electricity sound kind of.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
it's kind of like you're EQing it, but in a
that's it. Well, but that's exactly what EQ is. It's a filter.
yeah, that's
So
true.
it's perfect. That's the perfect way to describe it.
Actually, let me see if I can even can you tell me if you can hear this? So I'm going to EQ my voice so that the bass in it is really more emphasized. And can you hear the difference? I'm still talking in
Yeah.
the same way, but I've just like really emphasized the bass. So now it's back to normal. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the high frequency of my voice, where now it's probably going to sound a little bit thinner because, I mean, it's still me, but I've just decided to turn up the high frequencies. Yeah, that was fun.
That's a, that sounded great. Yeah, messing with EQ. I've lost so many hours messing with filters and EQ.
Oh, us
Well,
both.
so,
So
so
anyway, okay. So this is
those
relevant
who are
because
yeah, so it's totally relevant. So when we see Kylo Ren in the hallway, there's like this heartbeat kind of going on. And it speeds up with the tension. So what we'll do is we'll play our sound and we'll speed up the sound by increasing the frequency or the pitch. But see, it's at such a low pitch, it won't really sound like music. It'll just sound like something getting faster,
that
right?
is
So
very satisfying.
that's kind of what happens in the hallway. You hear, I don't know if this is the exact process they used, but it's the general principle of like, oh, let's increase the frequency, and it's like,
Yeah. Yep.
obviously they would do a lot of Hollywood stuff to make it sound better, like a lot of like nice audio effects, like compression and like a good mixing process. But it's the basic philosophy behind what's happening there.
And you can almost visualize it, like take it out of the sound realm primarily, and maybe if you just imagine like ping pong ball between two paddles, like or like a floor and a ceiling, and then you slowly you close in the floor and like the ceiling lowers in on itself, and so the ping pong ball just has to basically be more frequent in its
That's a perfect explanation. And if you were to increase the ping pong ball, like if you were to increase the speed of the ping pong ball so much, it'll turn into like a musical pitch.
yeah. Yep. And that's why synthesizers are so cool.
Oh my gosh, are they cool?
Yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, imagine this ping pong ball has an endless motor, so you don't have to worry about it like actually just dragging. But if you were to just close in on the like the ceiling and the floor, and make it tap, make it
Oh, I'm
it's fine, and then it would raise in pitch effectively. So, if you're watching on YouTube, you you'll notice that Justin just made himself like really big, like front and center, and I'm picture in picture on his eyeball. Um, but don't worry, most people are listening on the podcast. I'll fix it while we talk. So, is this thing that you're talking about, is it happening like while they have their dialogue, or is it right before?
It's when they see each other, and it's kind of
Okay.
the heart rate is kind of going once it cuts to the hallway. I think the heart rate is starting to speed up when like they're gonna make eye contact or something. And the way I perceived that as like a sound design choice is like, yeah, I mean, the tension is rising because, there's a lot of tension between Ren and Kylo, and this really weird thing is happening too. with the Force, right? Where they're like seeing each other and all of that. So
Absolutely. And I think the thing with their breathing and the intimacy of that fits in with that as well. But
oh,
what you are, yeah,
it's perfect. It's
yeah,
perfect, right? The breathing and the heartbeats, like those sounds, they're a perfect like marriage. They're a perfect complement to one another, and they definitely create that like edge of your seat kind of a vibe.
absolutely. And then when we hear them actually deliver lines of dialogue, this blows my mind because it sounds as though their words are traveling through space from one to the other. Like it's a very felt experience of the words traveling. And there's like I don't know, how would you describe, like, do you feel that way too? Like the way that they are speaking to each other has like such a visceral impact on me. Like I feel that it's, I don't know, it's like when you're on a Skype call and there's maybe a little bit of delay. It's not exactly delay is what's happening, but it just is different from when you're actually talking face to face. Um, and so what I what stood out to me, okay, I'm explaining this really poorly. Okay. So the first thing that I hear, tell me if I'm, tell me if you heard the same thing, was the reverse of Kylo's line. Like we start with the back end of his line. Is that right? Because it has that
Yeah,
like classic like sound.
it's reverse. It's reverse reverb, right? So
Yes, exactly.
you have a sound and you put it through like a reverb. Anyone out there who doesn't know what reverb is,
I'm
it's
about to,
like
I'll demonstrate this.
oh, amazing,
Okay.
amazing.
Mm. Okay, I'm going to put some reverb on. Okay. So, whoa. What is Kylo's first line? Let me just see. You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. Okay, so you'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. So, well, you're hearing me now. You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. So, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to reverse what I'm saying, and you'll hear that. First, let me just record it. You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. Okay. So now I'm going to reverse that so you can, well, let me just, yeah, I'm like doing this on the fly here. Okay. So now I'm going to reverse what I just actually recorded so you can hear that. See that? You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. And that's it forward. I basically just boomeranged it like backwards and then forwards. And you can hear how the beginning of that, which is the end of it, reversed. So the beginning of the reversed version sounds like
It's like breathing in.
yeah, yeah. And what you're hearing there is reverse reverb. So I'll do that again. You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. Yeah, like, well, in the movie, it is a little bit more immediate. I could probably do that. You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. Something like that. So that, it's like once you hear that reverb sound, like once you know what the reverse reverb sounds like, I promise you will hear this all over. You'll hear it all over the film. They use this technique a lot to quite an effect, I think. So that's one thing that's happening when they speak. There's the reverb, which I demonstrated. There's the reversal. Well, they play things reverse and then forward, sort of like a boomerang. I think they actually are like somewhat playing the actual dialogue in reverse, but just really, really sped up. So it's not as obvious as when I did it. But and then another thing that happens throughout is they are panning their voices, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, panning is a really great way to create space. And it was even more exciting in the theater because you have more speakers that you can pan on.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, is that fun? If you ever get the chance to do sound design for a theater, I've only gotten to do it twice, but it was really fun.
What, like a movie theater?
It was for a planetarium, actually.
That is so cool.
So we did these concerts at Arizona State University. That's where I was doing my doctorate, and we did these concerts in the Arizona State University planetarium, and they have all of this data from NASA, and they like can visualize like the solar system and like fly you around through it. And we did all of these like space themed electronic pieces for the theater, and then you sat there and people flew you through outer space listening to these like crazy space pieces. So it
That
was really
is
fun.
very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
So,
fun.
wow. Okay. I'm going to demonstrate panning um, for the podcast now. Note to self: I need to export this in stereo. All right. So, or it won't make any sense. Okay. So, what panning is, well, let me just show you an example. So now, you'll hear that I'm on one side of you. And now as I talk, my voice is traveling to the other side. And now it's in the center. Now it's in both sides. So the way that they mix this dialogue is they have it like literally traveling. So if you were watching this in a theater, you would hear the fact that their sound is traveling. So it'd be like, "You'll bring Skywalker to me," or something like that. Um, it is so trippy, and at certain points you feel like they're in your space almost. It's sort of like
Yeah.
it feels like Kylo Ren's like in my head when he
Well,
says that.
panning, like in terms of like, so there's this idea of like semiotics, this idea of like understanding what something means in society. So like a stop sign is something that we have a semiotic understanding of, right? Even if it doesn't say stop on it, we recognize what that symbol is when we're driving on the road. Like we see this red like geometrical shape and we know, oh, stop the car, right? So sometimes as a sound designer, you can kind of take advantage of like people's sort of cultural understanding or understanding of what things mean in society. And I always looked at panning as something that's very deeply connected to the psychedelic rock movement. If you go and you listen to a lot of Jimi Hendrix, there's a lot of panning going on. There's a lot of moving the sound from the left ear to the right ear. And psychedelic, maybe I'm stretching here, but like psychedelic rock
No
music
way.
is
I
very
think of
much,
picture. Wait.
yeah.
Picture yourself on a boat.
So if you're looking to make a statement about something that's happening psychologically that feels almost unnerving or kind of psychedelic or something that's almost out of body, then the decision to pan is actually a great sound design decision.
I didn't even think of that. I think, yeah, okay. I see where you're going. I'll also say that, I mean, while I am familiar with psychedelic music, and I don't want to say I wasn't influenced by that at all, I feel like the effect, it didn't consciously conjure that for me, which doesn't mean that I'm not subconsciously affected by my culturalization from listening to that. But the visceral feeling of having something panned to one side also just feels like someone's on your right side talking to you. And it does like literally feel closer. And you know what I'm saying? Like it's not
That's a
100
more,
it's not
yeah.
100% a
No, I mean
cultural.
that's a more normal, like human way of thinking about it. I
I
tend
liked your
to over.
explanation too. It's probably
Oh no, no. I mean, I probably overanalyze the heck out of it.
no, I mean, none of these things are wrong though. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Because different experiences. I think when people make connections in their head that they end up not being able to explain, I don't think that means that they were wrong or didn't show enough work. That always makes me think like, what would I need to, like, how can I understand that? And what am I missing? like I just feel like there's always puzzle pieces to fill. I'll also say that
Yeah.
like the inclusion of um, reverb is also reverb plus the panning is also a psychedelic thing as well.
Yeah, and in general, just the way I always think about approaching sound design is it's okay if people don't know your exact thought process as long as it basically works. That's all that really
100%. I
matters.
mean, who would be able to like pick apart the process of this thing? Even in
Yeah.
theaters, I was just like, my first thought wasn't like, oh, they're panning and playing things forward and backward with reverb. Like my first thought immediately while watching this was like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling invaded. Like I felt it and experienced it. Um,
And that's all that really that's all we're trying to do when we make sound design is we're just trying to help people enjoy the story and get more into it.
yeah. On a previous episode, I think it was Tony and I we were talking about reverb, and so I was noticing that in a lot of the first order scenes, they have very big spacious ships, and it's always like pretty cold decor. There's not a lot of comforts in first order territory or empire, I would say. And so I was noticing how much their dialogue was reverberating, like how much reverb there was in the first order spaces. Very different from like when you're in Luke's hut and there's like his road and like, it's intimate. There's not cold, cold surfaces, hard surfaces. And I was thinking about how I think reverb it tells us a lot about the space that we're in subconsciously. And it tells us a lot about the experience. It just tells us a lot about it, informs so much about the setting um, without it being really obvious as it's happening. It's sort of felt. Like the way I think about reverb is if something is reverberating a lot, then I think it's far away. It feels far away from me.
Well, makes sense. I mean, when you go out into the mountains, I live in North Carolina in the Appalachian area. That's where I teach at Western Carolina University, and it's a very like naturalistic environment. And so we have a lot of mountains. And if you go out and you talk into this huge mountainscape, you're going to get this big like echo. And it makes sense that things feel far away. Yeah, because it's echoing off of this far away place and kind of coming back. So I could totally see why you would say that.
And so the reason I bring it up is because not only are there reverse, reverb, and panning effects in their vocals, but there's also like a modulation of all three of those elements throughout. So they transform throughout. Like it's not just you set reverb to level 5 and keep it throughout. It starts on more reverb and then ends with less reverb as the sound reaches them. I think. I mean, that's at least what I heard. So let me get my reverb back on. So it's more like now I'm bringing the effect back. Wait. You'll bring Luke Skywalker to me. Blah blah blah. You can hear the end of what they're saying with more clarity than you can the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I totally got that from the scene. Oh, sorry, I have loud cars driving by.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I was just like, well, we're playing so many sound effects. Who knows? Yeah, the point is like this is such the sound design here is so dynamic and deliberate. And what's funny is that it almost comes off to the audience as the absence of sound because they cut out the music and it sounds vacuumy
Did
and
that a lot in this film.
yeah, they did. They're
I
like,
don't
pay attention
know.
to the sound design.
Yeah, I think there's a future moment you'll probably do a podcast on. I don't want to spoil it, but there's like that big moment with the spaceship.
Yeah.
And
I think
so I
we all
won't
know. We all know.
I won't ruin that for I won't ruin that. But they made a lot of decision to focus on particular things or focus on a small isolated amount of sound. There's a lot of the absence of sound in this film.
Yeah. Very calculated absence of sound. So let's move on to the next part, which is after their forced chat, we get a little bit of incidental music as Luke, when Luke interrupts Rey And then the lanai caretakers show they are exasperated with Rey. There we get a little descending chromatic line. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like, oh, wait, I need to take two. It's like something like that. Not exact notes at all. But that goes right into the Luke and Exile themes, which we talked about in episode 5 in Luke's music video montage section where he's traipsing the island. Yeah, after that little piece of incidental music, we go right back into Luke and Exile, the Sarabande. So I'll repeat that. And then we go to the next Luke part, which is the Octo Arpeggios. And I find this interesting because it happens as Luke is climbing up the stairs. I mean, they're both climbing up the stairs. He's leading Rey. And then we go down a half step. I think I'm doing it in the wrong key. Just a second. It goes down. It goes down. And the reason that's interesting for me is because the last time we get those arpeggios, we actually went up. And that was when we were getting Luke being Luke on the island with that epic montage. And here it's just the fact that they are climbing the steps while the arpeggios go down. I just find that interesting. And, what happens after this, it gets a little bit creepy and ominous. And I think for me, it symbolizes at least that Luke is feeling trepidatious a little bit. He doesn't have a great feeling about training Rey, and he has a lot of hang-ups about this and knows that there's going to be some dark parts ahead. But, that's what it means to me. Anyway, then Rey approaches.
That was a great breakdown.
Thank you.
Sorry, I jumped in. I was like, oh, I should just say it's a great breakdown because I thought you were done, but you're totally not done recapping. Please continue.
It's all good. And then Rey approaches like the center. What is it? I don't even know what it's called. The center of the place. And we hear some very high piano or flute notes. It's very subtle. But, there's actually a lot of bassy stuff happening too. But my ear pointed out the high part. And then it morphs into the Force theme. As Rey says, Master Skywalker, we need you to bring the Jedi back because Kylo Ren is strong with the dark side of the Force. Without the Jedi, we won't stand a chance against him. So, and then Luke says, what do you know about the Force? It's a power that the Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float. And then here, when Luke is saying, impressive, every word in that sentence was wrong, we get the thing that I've brought up in a past episode, and someone did email me about. We get Luke's Force theme counterpoint. So I don't know what to call it yet, but. And it goes. Nope. So, yeah. Luke is like always on this. It's like a tritone thing. This particular interval is unstable. And, it's just Luke always gets that. So, pretty much every time we've heard the Force theme, we get the dark Luke counterpoint. So, just wanted to bring that up as the running tally. And then we start the Force lesson, and this is another whole section where very cool stuff happens. What do you think about this section, Justin?
A lot of times when I see the what am I what I don't want to say prequel trilogy again. I already
Sequel?
made that mistake. Sequel trilogy. A lot of times when I see the sequel trilogy, the first thing that sticks out to me is I guess it's visual, it's not sound design, but it always sticks out to me how differently it's shot. And they really shot this. It was a really beautiful like location, or well, I don't know how much was location and how much was CGI. I'm not really a visual effects person. Um,
It was mostly location, actually, this island, except for like some parts where ship were installed on the island. And then the part where she goes, well, it's not in these minutes, but the part where she looks down into the dark hole, that specific hole is CGI.
oh,
But a
okay.
lot of
Well,
the
just
island is, yeah.
yeah, where they're sitting just really took my breath away. In fact, in a rare moment, I actually was not thinking a whole lot about the sound when I saw where they go to sit for the lesson, because I was just like, oh my gosh, like, especially because I have a fear of heights. I'd be like, man, I wouldn't sit on that rock if he told me to.
And that's why you're
So
not a
yeah,
Jedi. No, I'm just
no, I mean, I don't want to be a Jedi. I want to be one of the droids that cleans the hallway.
I
So that
love that
way,
about you.
that way my voice would also be an ARP 2600.
We have a real nerd on our hands here.
Yeah, sorry. My favorite characters in the Star Wars saga are R2D2, Jar Jar. Sorry, everybody, um, and Qui-Gon.
Those
So
are that's a combination. Well, I feel like yeah. Um, we both responded
yeah,
to that Twitter meme a while ago that was like yourself and three Star Wars characters, and I
yeah.
remember we each thought each other's were interesting because mine was like Anakin, 3PO, and Grogu, and I really feel and I always have really I really always identified with Anakin being as a troubled youth with a lot of talent that could go really poorly with not good without good mentors and emotional stability. I really related to a lot of Anakin. 3PO I think is just the most underrated droid in Star Wars. I love 3PO. I He's my favorite droid, C3PO. He's dependable. He he takes so much shit. He doesn't. I mean, anyway, I don't want it to turn to a 3PO tirade, but I love 3PO. And then Grogu is just sort of just like I don't I don't know, like just excited about stuff, like about frogs, but then like scared, like who knows what Grogu was up to. And I feel like that a lot sometimes when I don't know, I'm hanging out with myself or even talking to other people, or I just start kind of free associating fun sparks of things in my head and no one really gets what is happening, but in my mind I'm like this little trivial thing is I can't, have no words for it because I just anyway long
So the greatest part about our picks for Star Wars characters, this way I can segue back into your
perfect.
really, really excellent recap, is I don't think any of the characters we picked would sit on that rock. I mean, Qui-Gon maybe, but he wasn't around at that time. So
So
none of
true.
them would have, like, yeah, so there you go. So it really works out
Oh
well.
yeah, I mean just to clarify, the main Rey and Luke, like, and Harry Potter, no part of me relates to those people at all. I don't relate to being a hero and being like any sort of pure or carrying hope and just like like I just that's not me. Someone
Well, and
else
I, I,
can be a hero.
I thought what they did with Rey when she gets the lesson was it was super well done because they did a good job balancing in terms of story. They did a good job balancing this idea that this is all new to her, but also she has a real natural ability to do this.
That is such a good point. Yes. Yeah. And I think here is when we get really amazing visual parts combined with amazing audio part, like sound really specific sound design moments. And I think what's cool here is like the the visuals and sound really line up and paint the picture of what's happening. So for those who can't remember this scene too much, it's like Luke is telling Rey to visualize, close her eyes, and she's starting to visualize the life on the island. And Rey's theme starts up playing in the background, but what is really front and center is these little bits of sound design that pop up as we get little time lapses of the things that she's visualizing. So we get like the island. He's like, "What do you see?" She's like, "The island." We get an aerial shot of the island, and we get a wind type of sound. Life pans over flowers. Death and decay. It pans down to fossils underground. That feeds new life. Time lapse of flowers growing. Warmth. Like each word is like we get this whole new visual and sound to listen to. I just think it's such a beautiful. I think it's such a beautiful part with Rey on that rock.
Well, and what I really love about Rey in general is there's always this correlation between her and nature, and they do a very good job carrying that out through the whole sequel trilogy. Um, her main theme is on a flute, and flute is this instrument that we commonly associate with like the natural world, like the forest or something, right? And when we think about the sound design, there's lots of wind sounds on this island because of where they are. Um, but I really like the wind sounds that we hear in this, and I have a lot to say about wind sounds. I don't know if it's okay for me to launch into all of that.
It is okay. That's what we're
Awesome.
here for.
So I'm going to go ahead and do like another little sound demo
Oh my
because
gosh,
wind
cool.
sounds are the best. So
So what is interesting about these wind sounds?
so the wind sounds that I heard a couple of different things going on, but I don't know about definitely. I am taking a wild guess that they did the classic electronic based wind sounds on top of natural recordings. So if you were to think about this, you might think like, you know, you have multiple layers of the sound and you have a nature recording, perhaps playing with some wind. And then over here, I have like a synthesizer and I'm going to electronically create a wind sound. And if you stack those two things on top of each other, what you can do is you can get the naturalistic environment happening, but you can also get some control as the sound designer over how is the wind going to move. So that way, when there's a key moment happening, you can kind of control that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, so we were talking about oscillators. Basically, a great way to describe an oscillator is it's this noise making thing. It makes sound.
Yep.
Um, so there's a certain type of oscillator called a noise oscillator, and it's exactly like you might think. It just imagine the static sound,
White
like
noise.
just yeah, white noise, just like shh,
Yeah.
right? And so what we can do is we can emphasize different frequency ranges of that sound, and
Mm-hmm.
so we can do what we did earlier, where we suppressed out some of the higher notes, so we can suppress out the higher frequency range, and we can move this thing called a filter with what's called a high resonance. I might be going a little bit to inside baseball here. But what we can do basically is um, we can move this way of filtering a sound, filtering the white noise to create the illusion of wind. If you don't know what a filter is, just
Mm-hmm.
put your hands over your mouth like this, and this is filtering, right? It's just like all you're doing is you're changing what sounds can come through.
Yeah.
So we use filters all the time in everyday life. You might like get angry and scream into a pillow. That way, not everyone can hear you. And what you're doing is you're filtering out the really high frequencies there because those are partially what people would be able to hear, if you're sharing apartments. They'd be like, "What's going on down there?" So, um,
Yeah.
in any event, we have a noise
And if you're
oscillator
basing, and
here.
if you're emphasizing the bass in your music, um, never mind.
That's a great conversation to get into, though.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play um, a noise sound for everyone. Can everyone hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And now to create this illusion of wind, I'm gonna move the filter cutoff.
Can you play the original sound, but like don't be scared to play it a little bit longer, because I think once we start to hear it, like give us some time to hear it, like 10
Yeah,
seconds.
to digest, of
Yes,
course.
exactly.
Yeah, I do this
I know,
too
'cause
often. Yeah, so sometimes if you do something like every day, all the time, you forget that you should you should
let us get used to it.
demonstrate things in a way that lets people digest it. So yeah, of course.
Cool. Perfect.
So that's a really great sound to fall asleep to, actually. Sometimes I put on a noise oscillator and just let it play, and it helps me fall asleep. But maybe I'm weird. Well, that we can
No, people
definitely
do this on their,
confirm.
people have apps for this. It's
Yeah,
just
that's the
funny
way I
that
look at
you
it.
literally open a computer program and look. I mean, yeah. What I would call open the app and put on white noise, you call let me put on an oscillator. Yeah.
It's fun to synthesize it yourself.
You get to control your white noise. You have a little more control. No, I get it.
Yeah, I can customize it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna play that same noise, and what we're gonna do is move the filter cutoff. So this moves the position of the filter, and we're going to emphasize different higher frequencies, and that's going to create the illusion of wind.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And specifically, we'll hear this when we go to the first exterior shot of the island, when Luke is going up the steps and telling Rey to, follow along for your first Force lesson. I mean, that's not the exact line, but
Mm-hmm.
so we hear something kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, and I always notice those sounds because I love them. I love white noise.
I think it's so important that you brought that up, because while wind could naturally sound like that, what are the chances that, like, even if they were only going with pure source recordings of wind sound, like they would have had to find the place where it did that. Like it's intentional that they wanted it to go whoo, like there. And
Yeah, it's
yeah.
nice to have the control. It's really nice to have the control.
Yeah. And more than just like, oh, there's wind sound, like the nature of the wind sound is worth looking into.
Yeah. Well, and so on that note, there are wind recording sounds taken that's used in The Empire Strikes Back, at least. So I know that's a different film, but it's really interesting. There's a great article on StarWars.com about this, where Ben Burtt was discussing the wind sounds that they used for Hoth in Empire Strikes Back.
What are they?
So, fascinatingly, he says, they went to Norway to record some sounds up there, but they didn't really get much because it was just the conditions were really harsh. So they didn't get a lot of usable sounds. They got some wind, but that he found the solution for creating the wind sounds that he wanted because he was driving down like a 19-mile road, and he found that if he cracked the window open of the driver's side on the car and turned the engine off and just coast down, which is, I'm not endorsing this in any way, shape, or form, but he found that he could get car coasting wind recording sounds. And I mean, that is so, talk about a weird way to filter, but we were just talking about how filters comes in all shapes and sizes. You could put your hand over your mouth while you talk. You could scream into a pillow. Well, this dude was like, you know what? I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive down a road and I'm going to turn the engine off and crack my window. And the window is going to filter the wind sound coming through. That's
So
how
is
good
that
it
used
is.
in the Hoth scenes?
I think so. I mean, from what I read, yeah, that's how they got. that's,
That's
I mean,
pretty amazing. Can you play? Is there a sound clip of Hoth?
uh, I, I have. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. It is on this. It is on the site.
Okay, maybe not.
I could
Oh
click
wait,
play. I don't think you'll
yeah,
hear
just
it
try it.
though.
No, can't hear it. But I'll put a link in the show notes if people want to compare the Octos wind to the winds of Hoth, which I think would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and they did also use like an old school wind machine, and these are like really big machines you can crank, and it will kind of generate a wind sound. They use those as well. Wind sounds are if any of that was just too much discussion of wind sounds, just know that wind sounds, much like the ARP 2600, are wonderful, and you could always use more of them in your life.
And I think the takeaway is that they are more varied than we give them credit for. Yeah, 'cause there's
And
not just
it's
one.
it's
Even in this sequence, we get multiple instances of wind and multiple instances of waves, but they're all so different. Like when Ray says the island, and we get a little bit of the wind sound, that's one thing, and then we get life panning over the flowers. We hear a bird chirp. We hear like another sort of howling sound. It's a different sort of ambient wind. Um, death and decay. It's like the wind gets darker. There's probably some filtering happening that feeds new life. Warmth. We get a hot breath, which is, arguably something sort of like wind, but in this case, it more sounded like cold. We get a wave. Peace. We get the porg in the nest. Violence. Here we get another wave, but it's different from the wave we got during when she says cold. This is like a sharper and louder wave crash when she says violence. So yeah, there are just so many variations, so many colors. Colors of the
yeah.
wind. That's gonna be the episode title. I don't know, maybe.
I think that'd be a great
Yeah.
episode title. Um, yeah, I think in general that the sound design for The Last Jedi, it's definitely, the whole movie in general is definitely like different than the other Star Wars movies that came before it, and pretty different. But it's like you said, it's different in a way that's still kind of canon.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it is
so
canon
there's
now,
Yeah, of
but I know
course,
what you mean. It
yeah.
is referring a prior canon.
Yeah, it's like, it feels like we're still in the same kind of universe, but it feels like a very, very, very different place within that.
Yeah, which checks out with what the movie is.
I enjoyed it. I
Yeah,
enjoyed the movie.
I love it.
I can understand people not enjoying it. I don't know.
Same.
When I look at Star Wars or basically any film franchise, I don't want to tell people how to feel or how to think about
Of
it.
course
Like,
not.
if people are not into it, like, of course, like, no problem. I don't like getting into arguments with people online. It makes me too nervous.
I know what you mean. So before we end this, I want to read a few quotes from the sound designers regarding these scenes that might, I don't know, help us think about what their intentions were. Actually, I forgot. The end of this, we get the Force theme. Just so you know. Just so you know, when she says, Luke says, "And between it all," and Rey says, "Balance, energy." When she says energy, the sort of incidental music that's happening drops out to a single unison note. Can you hear that? And then it kind of sustains that note, and then it turns into. And this time, the Force theme is allowed to finish. When before we only get hints, and the phrase never finishes. Here we get the next chord. There we go. That's how it goes. Yeah. That was embarrassing. But we get that chord, is the point. It finishes.
You've played very well today, actually, so don't feel bad whatsoever.
I appreciate that.
I had a moment where I was teaching in class and I was sight reading something, and I went like altogether to the wrong system. I just kind of sat there like staring blankly at it for like 5 seconds, and the whole students, like everyone was just looking at me, and I remember thinking like, this feels like a long time.
It's always different when you try to whip it out as an example, like a casual example, and you're like, okay, wait, what key are we doing this in? How does it,
People don't realize how
voicing it
rehearsed that usually is, right? Like
True, when it goes well. Yeah.
Yeah, when it goes well, it's
But
like,
when it's me, it's not.
I have no idea.
Oh yeah, totally. Especially with something like this where it's like you get this where the theme changes. Like there are so many key changes. There's so many different manifestations of what sounds to the outside, like one single thing. I don't know. Changing, like doing different keys on the piano or on the violin is very different from doing it on the guitar when you move up a capo. But anyway, I mean, not always. I'm just saying the way I play guitar, that's how I do it. Other people are better than me. So yeah, okay. I want to name drop a term in case it comes up again, pre-lap, which is something that happens visually and auditorily. And that basically just means when this is like a common filmmaking technique, basically. It's like you hear what comes in the next scene while you're still on the last scene. So like you hear, it's a little bit of a, how would you describe it? Like it happens like before we cut away. So like it would be like hearing Kylo Ren's voice before we quite see him.
Yeah, it's like happening in advance kind of a thing. Like prior to whatever we see visually.
Yeah. So that's a lot of what's happening here. And then also, okay, so this is from Pro Sound Effects blog. Thank you. Ren Kleiss is saying, when we read the script, this is talking about the force connection between Rey and Kylo. We were thinking that there was going to be a visual effect, like they would be glowing, or like in Lord of the Rings, where they put on the ring and suddenly the world is scintillating with visual effects. We thought that there would be visuals that would inform us that they're speaking from across the galaxy. But when we saw it, it was way different than that. It was very bold style filmmaking on Ryan's part to do it with just editing and vertical cuts. It was very Kurosawa, very old school, which is a beautiful way to construct it visually. We realized that it would call upon the sound more to relay that these two people were somehow connecting with each other. So he's basically confirming that, like, through sound, they were going to have to make it sound like the sound is traveling. Their dialogue is traveling. And so one of the ideas that we had was to hear Kylo Ren's voice before he spoke, as if it was traveling through the galaxy toward Rey and at last arriving. And we hear it as the audience with her. So we used a technique of reversal where we took a line of his dialogue, which we demonstrated, or a line of her dialogue and reversed it. Then we added reverb and delay effects to their dialogue, reversed that processed dialogue again, and edited that ahead of the sound. So you hear pre-lap. And there's some more details that you can read, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And then another thing is, let's see. He adds that it was important to Johnson that the adversaries' voices felt organic and that they were approaching you from a great distance. So we talked about panning and reverb distance. So it's not just hi, hi, hi. It's hi. Can't do it. But hi. There's a lot of eyes.
Yeah.
It's coming at you from across the galaxy. And then they had things that would cut off to introduce the voices. So backwards into forwards motions, panning. Oh, Kleiss was the, I think, sound designer. Kleiss also panned the vocals, meaning that in the theater, like you were talking about, Justin, the audience could feel them coming from the left, the right, all around, and there's many layers. There's the reverb, you know, etc. So you have dialogue coming in, says Matthew Wood, and sometimes the dialogue is fully in the back of the theater, and that's pretty bold, which it is. So
That's the best part about surround sound is that when we were talking about panning, like I said, when you have a whole theater to play with, you can pan throughout the entire three-dimensional space,
yeah,
and that's what creates such a great surround sound experience when you're just sitting there and you feel like you're totally immersed in the world that you're watching on screen.
yeah. It kind of blows my mind. I mean, I'm used to. I mean, stereo implies right and left, right? It implies two speakers. I have two speakers sitting on my desk. One comes from the right, one comes from the left. But if I had surround sound here, then I could hear something coming from diagonal right, and I could hear something like in front of me. I could hear something above me, below me. Um, there are just so many different ways you can bounce. It's like ventriloquy. Ventriloquy.
Ventriloquism? I don't
Ventriloquy.
know. I think we all know what you mean.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
There's also a lot of there's a lot of exciting developments happening in the field of sound spatialization, and like ambisonic audio is a
What is
thing
that?
now. So ambisonic audio means that, well, it could mean a handful of things, but if you were to take an ambisonic recording, you would get a microphone that has like, it almost looks like a flower. It's got like four capsules and it's arranged in a tetrahedral. Never mind.
No, no.
Basically,
Keep going.
yeah, it's a tetrahedral arrangement. And so you could put that microphone up. And what you would do is you would record not only the sound in that space, but you would record the actual like physical space. And so
Oh, okay.
then you can bring that into different environments. Excuse me, after you finish recording that, you can take that recording and you can port it to different systems. So you might have a special kind of ambisonic sound system, which would have, tons of speakers in it. And then it will play that recording back, and it will feel as if you're standing in the center of the space where the audio was taken, which is really remarkable. And they're
Got it.
starting to
So if I
do
did it here, and you played it, then people would hear my voice and maybe the low hum of the fridge.
yeah, and we would actually be able to localize where the fridge was. We'd be able to know where is it in space. Oh, it's back
That's
right.
amazing.
Okay, and you could like turn around and hear it. So this is a very exciting thing that's happening in the sound spatialization world, and it began far before the present day. But when technologies like XR, technologies like virtual reality, augmented
I was going to say,
reality,
I bet
mixed
this is
reality,
definitely going to be used in AR, VR,
yeah, it's been pushing
and
that
theme parks.
development
I bet Disneyland.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very exciting, and these things are out there right now. I actually was really lucky. I worked at a company, Ball2 Technologies. Shout out to them. I worked at a company that was sort of specializing in these XR technologies, and so I got
Sorry,
to.
what does XR mean?
Oh, it's like the blanket term, like for all of these virtual
VR, AR.
reality, mixed
Okay.
reality. It's like
Gotcha.
if you don't want to say VR, AR, MR, you just say XR and it
Okay.
means like all of them. Either that or I'm totally wrong and some
I like
virtual reality
your
specialist
definition is clean, so I'm going to go with that for now.
I think it's right, and if it's not, someone will correct me.
Perfect.
But yeah, so ambisonic audio is a very exciting development, and really, I guess all I'm trying to get at here is that space, um, the idea of moving sound through space and putting it in different places within a room is very exciting, and it's
Yeah.
part of that theater experience. It's part of the reason we still want to go to the movie theater is we want that experience of like you have that excitement when you sit down and you hear the THX theme come on and it sounds so big. And then, the movie starts, especially with Star Wars, that big, like grandiose John Williams theme, and you feel like your heartbeat going faster. and then all of the sounds are swooping in from everywhere, and it's such a great auditory experience. And that's really what like made me fall in love with the Star Wars franchise.
That's a perfect way to end this. I'm really grateful that you came on and got in the weeds with us, and that we really got to explore more this important concept that I reference but haven't really gone into in enough detail about sound informing the space and the way sound travels. And I love that you're just as passionate about it. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks.
Where can people find you online?
Oh, I have a website. It's my full name, justinleokennedy.net, and it's all underscored, and it's all one space. And I also teach in the commercial music and audio production program at Western Carolina University. And so if you
Cool.
are looking to do some electronic music in college or whatever, I'm a good person to talk to. Even if you don't want to come and study with me, I'll tell you other places you can study if you want to.
And I'll say if anyone listening, if you ever have like any type of audio question or whatever, I'm sure Justin would be happy if you tweeted at him. He's answered many of my questions, actually.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember my handle. I changed it. It's at JLK_beret because I always wear a beret. It's like my mom used to wear one, so I wear one.
Love it. I'll put that in the show notes. And you also have don't you have a resource of like cheap software or something?
I do. I shouldn't take full credit. I made that with a producer named Gabe Spivey. He also goes by Salt, and a colleague of mine. His name is Gil Dory. And so we put together a resource document where it shows you affordable software, but also like free
Like music
software that you can use. Yeah, for music software and sound making software. And a lot of the stuff on there is free. Some of it is you would have to pay, but we tried to keep it only inexpensive items, basically.
That's great. So if anyone listening wants to dabble or more, yeah, I'll put all the links in the show notes. Wow. Thank you again. And if you're listening, I hope this was interesting. Please reach out if anything in particular resonated with you. Never mind. I was going to make a filter joke. High resonance filtered with you. High resonated with you. Nope. I should not make jokes. And
if anything resonated, yeah. If
I don't know,
if there was,
I could have just kept talking, but I just like had to. I don't start over. Okay. I'd love to know if anything in particular resonated with you, or if you have any questions, or if you have any wind sounds that you want to share. Now I'm gonna be listening with a special ear toward wind, thanks to Justin. You can leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. You can ask me on Discord if you're a patron. You can send an email to podcast@starwarsmusicminute.com, or I'm on Twitter, Chrysanthe Tan and Star Wars Musicman. I appreciate you so much. Thank you to Pete and Alex from Star Wars Minute for inspiring this journey. And that's it. I'll see you next week on Star Wars Music Minute.